one of history's most revered religious voices has spoken at a moment of global peril. Today, we bring you breaking developments from Rome. Pope Leo XIV, in only the fifth week of his papacy, has issued a powerful, faith-driven call for peace amid escalating airstrikes between Israel and Iran. From St. Peter's Basilica's solemn halls, he demands responsibility and reason, urging leaders to retreat from the brink, pursue sincere dialogue, and build a future founded on justice, fraternity, and the common good. Stay with us as we explore the layers behind this dramatic appeal. 1. Moment of escalation. In the past 48 hours plus, the Middle East has witnessed a seismic shift, an unprecedented military escalation between Israel and Iran that threatens to ignite a wider regional conflagration. Israel launched a sweeping preemptive strike, dubbed Operation Rising Lion, against Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure. Over 400 targets were struck, including the Natanz uranium enrichment facility, missile arsenals near Kermanshah and Tabriz, military installations in Tehran, and air bases linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Israeli forces reported eliminating several senior Iranian commanders and 9 nuclear scientists, framing the strikes as a vital measure to curb Iran's growing nuclear threat. Iran responded immediately with a massive retaliation, multiple waves of ballistic missiles and drones targeted central Israel. Iranian state media claimed they were defensive reprisals following what it labeled a criminal act by Israel. The Iranian UN ambassador reported at least 78 people killed and over 320 injured within Iran in the Israeli assault, and those figures, cited by Reuters and AP, included civilians and scientists. On the Israeli side, multiple sources, including AP and Israeli emergency services, reported 3 civilian fatalities and dozens of injuries from Iranian missiles striking Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, and surrounding cities. Homes were damaged, and air raid sirens echoed over Jerusalem and Tel Aviv as Iron Dome, with U.S. defense systems and a U.S. Navy destroyer in support, intercepted numerous incoming projectiles. The imagery has been stark. Columns of smoke over Natanz and Tehran, air raid sirens, families racing to shelters in Israel, and buildings shattered by shrapnel. Hospitals in Iran treated women and children wounded in residential zones. In Israel, even newborns were evacuated to underground facilities as sirens blared. The military and diplomatic escalation is profound. Magnitude. Israel's reported 400-plus strike targets and Iran's barrage of over 100 missiles drones represent some of the largest open confrontations between the two nations. Casualties, at least 78 dead in Iran, reportedly including civilians, scientists, and senior commanders, and 3 Israelis killed, with dozens injured. Hundreds more are wounded on both sides. Defense cooperation. The U.S. dispatched Patriot and THAAD missile systems and naval assets to assist Israel's Iron Dome network, which reportedly intercepted a significant portion of the missiles. Diplomatic crisis. Planned U.S.-Iran nuclear talks in Oman have been shelved. Iran's foreign ministry called them meaningless in the aftermath, and the UN Security Council has been summoned as regional airspaces shut down. Regional ripple effects. Airspace closures disrupted international flights. Oil prices surged over 7%, financial markets wavered, and global leaders, from the UN to Egypt, Turkey, China, Russia, publicly urged de-escalation and diplomatic recalibration. For ordinary people, it's far more than stats and geopolitics. Israeli families wrote moving testimonies, mothers recounting fleeing to shelters mid-siren, the tremor of blasts rattling their homes, and yet a steady commitment to resilience. In Iran, public mourning for lost scientists and military personnel added layers of national grief atop international alarm. This escalation marks a dangerous pivot, from covert acts and proxy skirmishes to overt, large-scale warfare between 2 nuclear-capable nations. It signals a chilling possibility that centuries of religious, historical, and cultural tensions are spiraling into a strategic and existential clash. As Pope Leo XIV issues his urgent plea for responsibility and reason and warns that no one should ever threaten another's existence, the world now watches closely. Will this monumental exchange of force yield lasting consequences, or, tragically, even full-scale war? 2. A strong papal intervention. Despite only 5 weeks in office, Pope Leo XIV has quickly demonstrated a willingness to intervene decisively in moments of global crisis. On June 14, speaking at St. Peter's Basilica, he issued what Reuters describes as one of the strongest peace appeals yet of his 5-week papacy, urging Israel and Iran to embrace responsibility and reason and abandon nuclear brinkmanship. Unlike Pope Francis, whose style often featured spontaneous off-the-cuff remarks, Leo read his address from a printed Italian text, projecting precision, gravity, and deliberateness. The contrast is striking. Where Francis might pause mid-speech to address a crowd, Leo's calm, measured delivery underlines a conscious pastoral strategy rooted in clarity and doctrinal weight. In his statement, the Pope elevated the moral imperative underlying his appeal: no one should ever threaten the existence of another, he declared, pressing beyond simple ceasefire language toward a faith-infused affirmation of universal human dignity. This is not politics as usual, it's an explicit invocation of Catholic social teaching, justice, fraternity, and the common good as non-negotiable pillars. This measured yet resolute tone aligns with quotes from Arab News and the Jerusalem Post, which reflect that Leo's early gestures, including interfaith overtures to Jewish and Muslim communities, suggest a papacy intentionally balancing continuity with Francis's outreach, while forging its own path of moral leadership. This is Leo's moment to define himself. Not merely as a successor, but as a shepherd who leads with purpose and gravitas. His strong intervention suggests a Vatican that sees moral leadership as indispensable in de-escalating one of the most dangerous flashpoints of our time. 3. Core appeal, responsibility and reason. This shift, deliberate, doctrinal, and formal, signals to listeners that Pope Leo XIV's voice is becoming a defining one in global affairs, rooted in faith yet tuned to the urgency of our moment. From the pulpit of St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Leo delivered a sobering directive: leaders throughout the region must choose responsibility and reason, not aggression or brinkmanship, in the face of escalating conflict. With those island words, he framed this crisis not merely as a geopolitical clash, but as a profound test of moral leadership. He continued, the commitment to building a safer world, free from the nuclear threat, must be pursued through respectful encounters and sincere dialogue, founded on justice, fraternity, and the common good. Let's break down the 4 pillars of this message. 1. Nuclear disarmament and a safer world. By linking nuclear threat and safety, the Pope reiterates the Church's long-held stance. Proliferation fuels fear, not security. He echoes centuries of papal teaching, rooted in pacem in terris and reinforced by recent popes, that nuclear weapons represent a moral crossroads, not just strategic deterrence. 2. Respectful encounter and sincere dialogue. Respectful encounters and sincere dialogue aren't diplomatic platitudes, they are spiritual principles. By emphasizing encounter, Leo calls for listening without condescension. By invoking sincerity, he signals that words must lead to change. This mirrors his earlier Vatican dispatches urging interfaith outreach in a fracturing world. 3. Justice, fraternity and the common good. These triadic terms are not rhetorical flourish, they are foundational to Catholic social teaching. Justice ensures each nation's rights, fraternity demands shared dignity, the common good binds all stakeholders into a single moral community. He frames peace not as absence of war, but as a shared spiritual project. 4. No one should ever threaten the existence of another. That command is absolute. It transcends politics, geography, ideology, it's rooted in the sacredness of human life. In Leo's call, threats to existence aren't collateral, they are violations of divine and human law, anathema to faith itself. Why this matters, now? Timing, he delivered mid-conflict, his words serve both as spiritual balm and strategic intervention, appealing to conscience to interrupt violence before all-out war. Source, a new, American-born pope, his prepared, measured tone underscores the gravity of the moment and signals a deliberate pastoral strategy. Reach, as an echo chamber amplifier, his message bolsters UN and global leaders urging calm, while offering moral support to internal actors, diplomats, moderates, faith leaders, who are pushing for escalation avoidance. 4. Why it's a stronger appeal. Pope Leo XIV's recent statement isn't merely another papal commentary, it marks the most forceful and deliberate peace appeal of his young pontificate. A deliberate break from the wake of Francis. Where Francis often delivered spontaneous remarks, off the cuff, impromptu, and conversational, Leo has opted for carefully crafted, precise messaging. This time, speaking to the crisis in Israel and Iran, Leo read from a prepared Italian text in St. Peter's Basilica, underscoring the gravity of his words and the stakes at hand. By doing so, he signals that this is not a casual observation, it is a moral injunction. One of his strongest public declarations. Reuters described it as one of the strongest peace appeals yet of his 5-week papacy. That's significant. It's not just a response, it's a defining moment, sharpening his pastoral voice into a call to global responsibility. Regal tone of moral authority. This isn't mere commentary, it's a command. Phrases such as, "No one should ever threaten another's existence," and "responsibility and reason" echo far beyond diplomatic pleasantries. This is papal teaching, rooted in Catholic social thought, delivered with unmistakable clarity and force. A clear stylistic contrast. Observers, from ABC News to Reuters, note his measured style, describing Leo as more cautious and measured than Francis, deliberately avoiding spontaneous asides and instead conveying authority through structured, text-based addresses. This formal posture lends weight to his words, making them resonate more like doctrine than as commentary. Strategic timing amid crisis. Delivered during active military exchange, this was never mild. The Vatican intentionally timed the message to coincide with the most dangerous escalation between Israel and Iran in years. It came not as commentary, but as intervention. Crafted to mobilize conscience. By packaging it in formal, prepared Italian from the pulpit, Leo isn't speaking to church insiders, he's speaking to global leaders, diplomats, and mass media. The structured delivery invites seriousness, emphasizing, this moment demands reflection, not reaction. Framing the conflict in moral terms. This isn't stop firing, it's do not threaten existence. He framed the crisis in the highest moral terms, nuclear disarmament, justice, fraternity, not simply as policy options, but as requirements of conscience and faith. In short, this is more than a papal statement, it's a cornerstone declaration. Pope Leo XIV is asserting his role not only as spiritual shepherd but as moral barometer. By choosing formal delivery, moral weight, and strategic timing, he elevates this plea from commentary to command. It's a powerful narrative shift, a young pope stepping onto the world stage with a pulpit-born moral voice, determined to shape the global conscience. 4. Historical papal context. Over the decades, the Vatican has consistently positioned itself as a moral compass on nuclear issues, and Pope Leo XIV's recent plea echoes a long ecclesiastical tradition. Back in 2006, Pope Benedict XVI warned that relying on nuclear weapons for national security was not only baneful but also completely fallacious. He urged world leaders to pursue progressive and concerted nuclear disarmament and stressed that the Global Non-Proliferation Treaty must never be weakened. Benedict also acknowledged the peaceful potential of nuclear technology, supporting its use for authentic development while maintaining that it must not serve militaristic ends. Then came Pope Francis, whose papacy marked a defining shift. In 2017, he became the first pope to condemn not just the use of nuclear weapons, but their mere existence, as immoral. During his 2019 visit to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Francis reaffirmed that both the use and possession of atomic weapons are morally unacceptable, warning that the possession itself inevitably ends up poisoning relationships between peoples and obstructing any possible form of real dialogue. These interventions are rooted in a broader historical magisterium. From Pope John XXII's 1963 Pacem in Terris, which appealed to all men of goodwill to pursue peace through justice and negotiation, not violence, to papal roles in Cold War diplomacy, including discreet contributions to defusing the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Church has long leveraged moral authority to temper international tensions. Francis further emphasized that true disarmament requires inner transformation. Eliminating nuclear arsenals isn't only strategic, it must reach men's very souls. His message urged states to channel resources into peace rather than war, linking faith, conscience, and planetary stewardship. In this lineage, Pope Leo XIV now continues a clear thread, urging a world free from nuclear threats founded on responsibility, reason, justice, fraternity, and the common good. His message, delivered early in his pontificate, resonates not as break, but as continuation, papal diplomacy that combines doctrinal clarity with global moral influence. It reminds us that the Church views nuclear disarmament as essential to faith, not only policy, a spiritual imperative echoing through Vatican declarations for generations. 6. Global reaction. Since the Israel-Iran conflict erupted, a surge of global voices has called for immediate restraint. United States stepped in swiftly. President Trump expressed strong support for Israel's right to act in self-defense, while underscoring that Iran would be wise to negotiate. The U.S. explicitly denied involvement in the strikes, even as it reinforced Israel's missile defenses and warned Tehran not to target American interests abroad. United Kingdom, a balancing stance. Prime Minister Keir Starmer emphasized Israel's right to defend itself but urged restraint and diplomacy. The British government clarified that it provided no direct military support for the strikes, warning against escalation and cautioning that a wider regional war benefits no one. China, firm diplomatic warning. From Beijing, China condemned what it described as violations of Iran's sovereignty and security. Its UN envoy demanded Israel cease risky military actions, emphasizing that escalation is counterproductive and expressing readiness to help stabilize the situation. Turkey, legal accountability. President Erdogan called the airstrikes a clear provocation and accused Israel of violating international law. Turkey joined others in urging an immediate de-escalation to prevent regional unraveling. Europe, unified alarm. European leaders, from Macron to Merz, Starmer to von der Leyen, joined calls for urgent diplomacy. Germany's Chancellor convened a crisis meeting, ready to use all diplomatic tools to calm the crisis. France reaffirmed Israel's security needs while demanding maximum restraint. Meanwhile, the United Nations has signaled grave concern. Secretary-General Guterres and the Security Council described the strikes as dangerously destabilizing, warning that the conflict could spread far beyond the region. Emergency sessions were convened, and the IAEA cautioned that nuclear site damage could trigger broader strategic fallout. Why this global chorus matters? Broad-spectrum unity, from Western democracies to China, Ukraine, Turkey, and multilateral institutions, there's a rare consensus: prevent escalation and return to talks. Diplomatic implications. The cancellation of U.S. Iran nuclear negotiations shows how quickly military action can derail delicate diplomacy. Regional spillover risk, with Gulf nations enforcing no-fly zones, oil prices surging, and stock markets nervous, leaders see an urgent need to intervene before conflict engulfs the broader Middle East. Setting the tone, while Israel asserts its right to self-defense and Iran vows reprisals, the global call for restraint hinges on whether morality and diplomacy can halt the downward spiral. As Pope Leo XIV's words reach diplomatic and religious audiences alike, the stakes have become clear. The world is watching, urging calm. The question now is whether collective moral pressure can outweigh the momentum of missiles and open a pathway back to dialogue. 7. Impact on diplomacy. In the high-stakes aftermath of this military exchange, one of the most consequential and overlooked victims is diplomatic progress. For months, the US and Iran had engaged in painstaking indirect negotiations aimed at curbing Tehran's nuclear ambitions. That sixth round of talks was scheduled for Sunday in Muscat, Oman. But Israel's surprise strike changed everything. Oman's foreign minister officially announced, the talks will not now take place. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi swiftly endorsed the decision, calling further dialogue unjustifiable in the wake of what he characterized as Israel's barbarous attack, and asserting US involvement had rendered the discussions meaningless. Reuters reports that Iran now faces a harsh decision point, suspending talks indefinitely or retreating purely into military escalation. This collapse of diplomacy carries immediate and long-term implications. First, it stalls any possibility of reviving the 2015-style nuclear deal, or at least any new framework that might delay or restrict uranium enrichment. Before the strikes, US negotiators and Iranian diplomats were reportedly nearing a compromise. Iran would cap enrichment levels and accept IAEA inspections in exchange for some sanctions relief and access to frozen assets. Now, that fragile process faces disintegration. Second, this diplomatic setback amplifies mistrust, not just between Washington and Tehran, but among regional interlocutors like Oman and the EU, whose efforts at mediation are now overshadowed by bombs and rockets. Third, Iran's articulation that talks are pointless sends a ripple through the global nuclear non-proliferation regime. If any actor feels negotiations are futile the moment force is used, diplomacy becomes hostage to violence. Fourth, this collapse hands strategic advantage to hardline factions in both Iran and Israel. Iranian leadership, already humiliated by the strikes, is under domestic pressure to project strength. The calculus now favors escalation, pulling back risks appearing weak. For Israel, the end of diplomatic constraints may validate further strikes as nations abandon restraint. The United States, eager to maintain some momentum, issued a cautious reassurance: diplomacy is still the goal. But with the premise of negotiations shattered, Middle East peace efforts stand on shaky ground. So what does this mean for global audiences? A military strike aimed at nuclear rollbacks has directly derailed a parallel diplomatic process created for that very purpose. As missiles fly, the chances for peaceful resolution shrink, diplomacy becomes collateral damage, buried under the rubble of escalation. Pope Leo XIV's urgent appeal for responsibility and reason thus gains urgent resonance. It isn't only a moral plea, it's a call to salvage the only strategy with a chance to avert full-scale war. 8. Religious dimensions. From the very start of his pontificate, Pope Leo XIV has made interfaith outreach a cornerstone of his ministry, signaling a deep influence on his peace appeal amid the Israel-Iran crisis. On May 8, immediately after his election, he sent a heartfelt letter to Rabbi Noam Marant of the American Jewish Committee. In it, Leo pledged to continue and strengthen the Church's dialogue and cooperation with the Jewish people in the spirit of Nostra Aetate. This wasn't routine protocol, it was a deliberate and tender outreach signaling a renewed commitment to Catholic-Jewish partnership at a moment of heightened tension. 10 days later, on May 18, Jewish leaders were given prominent seats at his inaugural Mass in St. Peter's Square, among ecumenical and interreligious representatives from across the world. Their presence underscored his determination to build bridges rooted in shared spiritual heritage. Following the Mass, Pope Leo personally met with Rabbi Riccardo di Segni, Chief Rabbi of Rome, and spoke gratefully of Jewish and Muslim attendees, expressing his intention to continue the dialogue that began 60 years ago with Nostra Aetate. He emphasized that mutual respect and freedom of conscience are essential foundations for peace, values essential to a joint moral stand against war and nuclear threat. Jewish leaders responded with cautious optimism. Rabbi Marans called Leo's letter extraordinary, saying it intentionally addressed current droughts in dialogue and noted that his style, both measured and sensitive, felt like the man the Church and the world need right now. This backdrop casts his recent peace appeal in a richer religious light. Leo's call for responsibility and reason is not just papal diplomacy, it's an interfaith call to moral unity. By rooting his plea in Catholic-Jewish harmony and dialogue with Islam, he frames the Israel-Iran crisis as not only political, but deeply spiritual, a test of shared conscience across faith lines. In this moment of sectarian tension, Pope Leo XIV does more than ask for peace, he embodies it. Through visible solidarity with Jewish and Muslim communities, he lifts his voice as a shepherd guiding humanity toward fraternity, justice, and the common good, urging not only political leaders, but believers of all faiths, to stand together against the nuclear abyss. 9. Rhetorical analysis. From the very first words, Leo XIV's speech is structured like a crescendo, each key phrase reinforcing the last, creating a mounting moral resonance. Responsibility and reason. He pairs these two terms deliberately. Responsibility appeals to ethical duty, reason to rational restraint. From the outset, we're asked not just to cease fire, but to act with both conscience and intellect. A world free from the nuclear threat. This shifts the focus outward, from individual decisions to humanity's collective future. It evokes a global vision, expanding the moral stakes from local conflict to planetary survival. Respectful encounter and sincere dialogue. Encounter evokes dignity and presence, dialogue, authenticity and trust. Together they sketch a relational blueprint, not just political negotiation, but mutual listening rooted in respect. Lasting peace founded on justice, fraternity, and the common good. This threefold progression is key. It starts with justice. Fairness under law. It moves to fraternity, brotherhood in shared humanity. And concludes with the common good, a unified societal well-being. Each builds on the previous, rising from principle to relationship to communal flourishing. No one should ever threaten another's existence. This is the apex. It's not callous or diplomatic, it's categorical. Existence is non-negotiable. A life-oriented maxim that brooks no exception. Duty of all countries, reconciliation, security and dignity. A subtle descent, after moral peak, to a practical, communal implementation, global responsibility, healing mechanisms, and upholding both safety and respect. 10. What comes next? As the dust settles, but only momentarily, the question looms, what comes next? Pope Leo XIV's soaring moral appeal now collides with hard geopolitical realities. 1. Will his moral authority sway world leaders? Here's the challenge: Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has signaled no intention to cease. He vowed to hit every target of the Ayatollah's regime, framing this as essential to national survival, even at the cost of derailed diplomacy. Iran, similarly, has declared its retaliation is just beginning, and nuclear negotiation is off the table for now, suspended until further notice. 2. Can spiritual diplomacy reopen broken channels? Right now, the diplomatic groundwork is in ruins. A U.S. Iran nuclear deal, with its next round of talks scheduled in Oman, has collapsed under the weight of violence. But beneath that collapse, Pope Leo's intervention introduces something intangible yet potent: moral gravitas. His call for responsibility and reason, centered in Catholic values of justice and peace, reaches beyond politics into conscience. It could inspire private diplomacy among faith-based intermediaries, quietly nudging leaders to revisit negotiations. 3. Will conflict deepen or diffuse? Analysts warn Israel may intensify strikes to degrade Iran's nuclear capabilities, even its regime. Iran, in turn, has already launched waves of missiles and drones. Experts see a risk of escalation into proxy fronts: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthi strikes near the Red Sea, even pressure on the Strait of Hormuz, which could trigger a wider regional conflict. 4. What are the broader consequences? Globally, oil prices spiked over 12%, markets are jittery, and world leaders, from the G7 to the UN, are sounding the alarm, emphasizing a pressing need for immediate de-escalation. US President Trump is caught in a geopolitical bind, condemning Iran's response, affirming Israel's right to self-defense, yet striving to salvage the diplomatic path he helped reopen. 5. Where does this leave Pope Leo's call? His appeal lands amid crosswinds, military momentum, diplomatic breakdown, regional fears. Yet it offers a spiritual pathway back from escalation. If faith-based emissaries and moderate states, Oman, Turkey, Vatican intermediaries, echo his voice, it stands a chance to shift the dynamics.